Mr. President, it's Andrew here. It's great to speak with you.
Good.
I just wanted to ask you about, you mentioned tariffs, and on Sunday you talked again about this idea of dividends for middle and lower income folks that might come off of the tariffs, meaning the revenue that's coming in from the tariffs. And I wanted you to maybe explain how that might work in practice and how you're thinking about that and the trade-offs between paying down the debt, which I thought was something you had been talking a lot about, versus sending checks out, because obviously that creates its own debt for us.
So we're taking in trillions of dollars, Andrew. If you look at Japan, we're taking in $550 billion. And that's like a signing bonus that a baseball player would get. He would get slightly less no matter how good he is, right? But they give a signing bonus of $1 million or $2 million or $20 million or whatever the hell they give today. It's so out of control. But a signing bonus. So I got a signing bonus from Japan of $550 billion. That's our money. It's our money to invest as we like. European Union, $650 billion. Think of it. And they're going to buy $750 billion worth of our energy. And they're going to do this, and they're going to do that. And, by the way, they're going to open up their countries, which they've never done. Japan has never. If you did business in Japan, they would arrest you. You're not allowed to do any business. And now Japan has totally opened up their country. They're even taking our rice, which is something that nobody said was possible. But more importantly, they're taking our cars. They're taking the very beautiful Ford 150, which does very well, and I'm sure will do very well there. And other things that do very well here will also do well there. You'd be surprised at some of the great things we make. But Japan has opened up. All of these. Indonesia's opened up their country. South Korea has opened up their country. But not only opened up, and that's going to be huge business. When you open up South Korea, it's a closed country. And now all of a sudden we're allowed to sell cars into South Korea and trucks and SUVs. I mean, we're really opening it up. Vietnam is opening up their country. You know, these are all closed countries. But the EU was closed. They wouldn't take our agriculture. I said to, let me just say a prime minister, a very nice prime minister, a couple of years ago, I said, how many cars are you taking a year? Let me guess, is it one or two? She said, no, we don't take any of your cars. I said, that's right. That's not nice. I said, that's not right. That's not a nice thing, Angela. But they took none of them, and now they take all our cars, all our trucks. Everything is open, 100%. In addition, the EU is going to pay us $650 billion. We're going to round it off, actually, because of certain things, to $600 billion. And think of it. They're going to put up $750 billion. We're a rich country again. Now, these are just deals that I'm announcing. These are the biggest ones because EU is, essentially Europe. We made great deals with all of the countries, and they're being fair about it. One other thing, for your listeners that perhaps are a little bit less wealthy than some of your listeners, I'm doing something that nobody's ever done before. As you know, for 30 years, Europe has had drug prices that are, in many cases, 1/10 the cost of drugs in here. Same manufacturing plant, same everything. 1/10. I've invoked favored nations. Now, there is no favored nations clause. I've just said there is, because we're not going to pay 10 times more per pill than they pay in Europe. Then that's going to have a tremendous impact on the price of medicine.
Mr. President, what kind of teeth, though, are in those investments? What kind of teeth are in those investments, meaning that would force the EU to make those investments? If they don't make those investments, what happens on the other side?
Well, then they pay tariffs of 35%. No, they brought down their tariffs. So they paid $600 billion, and because of that, I reduced their tariffs from 30% down to 15%. And a couple of countries came, how come EU is paying less than us? And I said, well, because they gave me $600 billion. And that's a gift. That's not like, a loan, by the way. That's not a loan that, 3 years comes up, we have to pay it back. There's nothing to pay back. They gave us $600 billion that we can invest in anything we want.
The deal that you
and nobody knows it, Becky. Nobody knows it because they don't know.
No, we have been trying to figure out the details on that, Mr. President. So
there are no details.
The clarity on that.
The details are $600 billion to invest in anything I want. Anything.
Okay.
I can do anything I want with it. And the purpose was they've been, ripping us for so many years that it's time that they pay up, and they have to pay up. We couldn't afford to have the deficits. Look, I did something with Switzerland the other day. I spoke to their prime minister. The woman was nice, but she didn't want to listen. and they paid essentially no tariffs. And I said, we have a $41 billion deficit with you, madam. I didn't know her. I said, we have a $41 billion deficit, and you want to pay 1% tariffs. You wanted 1%. I said, you're not going to pay 1%. We lose, because I view deficit as loss. You know, you have some people, by the way, I think
pharmaceuticals are a big issue with Switzerland. I think.
Well, I'll go into pharmaceuticals. Yeah. They make a fortune with pharmaceuticals, and they make our pharmaceuticals in China and Ireland and everything else. And within the next week or so, we're going to be announcing tariffs on specifically. This is this is a separate class than the 15% tariffs on sort of everything. These are excluded classes, I call them. I like to call them excluded, like steel, aluminum, etc.
Right, the 232.
We're going to be announcing on semiconductors and chips, which is a separate category, because we want them made in the United States. And by the way, they're being made in the United States. You know, we have the biggest in the world, as you know, from Taiwan is coming over and spending $300 billion in Arizona, building the biggest plant in the world for chips and semiconductors. But on pharmaceuticals, we'll be putting a initially small tariff on pharmaceuticals, but in 1 year, 1.5 years maximum, it's going to go to 150%, and then it's going to go to 250%, because we want pharmaceuticals made in our country. And that's not the CHIPS Act like Biden did, because he didn't know what he was doing, where they gave billions of dollars to companies that had more money than they knew what to do with.
President Trump, can I ask you about something that you're doing that's opposite of the Biden administration, too? And that's the latest deal that you've announced.
Everything.
The latest deal, though, that you're announcing with India, you're upset with the trade deal there, especially because they're buying Russian oil. The Biden administration sanctioned Russian oil, but then they kind of winked and nodded and appreciated that India and China were buying some of that oil because they were worried it would raise oil prices and thereby prices at the pump. To you, is it more important to shut down the Russians on this than to worry about oil prices?
I'm not worried about prices because we're drilling at levels that nobody's ever seen before. And what Biden did is he stopped my drilling. And then prices, if you remember that first couple of months, prices went through the roof. And he immediately said, let's go back to what Trump was doing. Let's go back to it. But by that time, they had blown it, and the energy prices were so high, and that's what caused that, and his crazy spending is what caused, by the way, the largest inflation in the history of our country was during the Biden administration. Not 48 years. You know, they like to say 48 years. It was the largest in the history of our country, the inflation that we had during Biden, because the man obviously didn't know what he was doing. But with India, what people don't like to say about India, they're the highest tariff nation. They have the highest tariff of anybody. We do very, very little business with India because their tariffs are so high. So India has not been a good trading partner because they do a lot of business with us, but we don't do business with them. So we settled on 25%, but I think I'm going to raise that very substantially over the next 24 hours because they're buying Russian oil. They're fueling the war machine. And if they're going to do that, then I'm not going to be happy.
There are a lot of deals signed. I don't know, I thought India was imminent. I'm not sure what the sticking point is there, Mr. President. But let's just, since we don't have all day, we got to talk China.
Well, the sticking point with India is that tariffs are too high. Now, I will say this. But India went from the highest tariffs ever. They will give us 0 tariffs. And they're going to let us go in. But that's not good enough because of what they're doing with oil. Not good.
It looked like you were going to have a meeting, and people were talking about it with President Xi, and then you went out of your way to kind of say other people are saying, I think you even called it fake news or something. It looked like you were indicating that you were unhappy or that talks had broken down, and we've had a couple of frameworks or some positive moves. And China, you've had a lot of success with other countries. China is a big deal and a big, not quite the elephant in the room, but certainly an important trading partner. Where does that stand? Will there be a meeting between you and President Xi? Anything planned at this point? What's the sticking point now, and how optimistic are you that we get a comprehensive deal?
Well, I can have a meeting. We have a very good relationship, but I didn't call for the meeting. He called for the meeting. So the fake news announced Donald Trump wants a meeting with China. No, I didn't want it. No, he asked for a meeting. And I'll end up having a meeting before the end of the year, most likely, if we make a deal. If we don't make a deal, I'm not going to have a meeting. I mean, what's the purpose of meeting if we're not going to make a deal? But we're getting very close to a deal. We're getting along with China very well. I will tell you, you had a point when I had 145% tariffs on. I put in for fentanyl. I actually said to people, where are we now with China, by the way, because I kept adding more and more. They said, sir, you're up to 145%. I said, you got to be kidding. So I sort of had to bring it down a little bit. But when it was up to 145%, meaning we were doing zero business with China, China was collapsing. I don't know if you know that. You haven't reported it if you do. But China was collapsing. China is very reliant on the United States. My relationship with him is very good. I think we'll make a good deal. It's not imperative, but I think we're going to make a good deal. But no, they had a thing that Donald Trump really wanted to go there. No, I don't. It's a 19-hour flight. It's a long flight. But at some point in the not-too-distant future, I will. And just to end this conversation in China, I have a very good relationship with President Xi. Always had, other than the COVID moment where I was very angry with him and essentially didn't want to talk to him, frankly, because, it did come out of Wuhan, in all fairness, which right. I was saying from the day one. I was saying I knew exactly where it came from. But that did interfere with the relationship. But no, I've had a great relationship right. with President Xi. We respect him a lot. They respect us a lot. They didn't respect Biden. They thought he was a numbskull. They couldn't believe he was the president of the United States, and neither can anyone else that happened.
Are you going to run again?
No, Constitution probably not.
Okay.
Probably not.
And you're not going to fire Jay Powell. We'll go all talk about all the stuff that.
Hey, Becky, I'd like to run. I have the best poll numbers I've ever had. You know why? Because people love the tariffs, and they love the trade deal, and they love that foreign countries aren't ripping us off anymore. For years, they ripped us off, friend and foe. And the friend was worse.
偷偷告诉大家，我最近发现了新法宝 Royal Face 逆时奇迹系列，它有活肤露、全效精华，还有精华霜。尤其我皮肤比较偏干，所以我非常的注重保湿。保湿做得好，肌肤自然烹润。提亮肤色更年轻，抚平皱纹超有感，而且气色变好。用心保养，每天都更美一点。美吧。